The man had just barely survived a plane crash, but after finally swimming to shore, he discovered that a massive horde of zombies was closing in. A soldier who had also survived the crash immediately abandoned him and ran for his life, relying on the shotgun in his hands to keep himself safe. Another soldier was even less fortunate. With his leg badly injured, he was left behind and brutally devoured alive by the approaching zombies. Seeing this, Brian quickly dragged the airdrop crate onto the shore. He then grabbed an oyster shell and desperately smashed it against the lock. Just as the zombie horde was about to swarm him, he finally managed to open the crate and grab the weapons inside. After taking down several zombies, Brian picked up the level 3 body armor and rushed into the woods. He eventually found a safe place to change out of his soaking wet clothes. With zombies now roaming across the entire African continent, Brian had no choice but to continue his aimless journey of survival. But the moment he entered a cornfield, he suddenly came face to face with a zombie. Fortunately, Brian was quick enough to raise his gun and blow it away. Still shaken, he didn't dare stay there any longer and hurried through the cornfield as fast as he could. A small village was located nearby, but everyone who once lived there had already disappeared. After making sure there were no zombies inside the houses, Brian noticed a beat-up car nearby. To his surprise, the engine still worked. He immediately grabbed a can of gasoline from one of the houses and filled the tank. Then he used a jack to lift the car up. However, while Brian was installing the tire, he had no idea that a large group of zombies was slowly closing in. When he suddenly turned around, a zombie appeared right in front of him, scaring the hell out of him. Brian quickly pulled out his pistol and killed it, but the gunshot only attracted even more zombies. With no time to waste, he hurriedly loaded the fuel can and spare tire into the car, tightened all the wheel bolts, then jumped into the driver's seat and started the engine. Just as the zombies were about to pounce on him, Brian slammed on the gas and managed to escape. But he hadn't driven very far when he ran into the teammate who had abandoned him earlier. Brian was still furious when he saw him, so he deliberately ran him over with the car before stopping to loot whatever supplies he had. Seeing the zombies catching up again, Brian had no choice but to keep driving. Unfortunately, when he reached a rough and rocky section of road, the tires suddenly lost traction. Brian quickly got out and began clearing the rocks away, but he had barely moved a few of them when the nearby zombies arrived. He had no choice but to get back into the car and try to drive away, only to discover that the tire was still completely stuck. With no other option, Brian got out and prepared to fight the zombies head-on. But after firing just one shot, he realized he was already out of ammunition. Things couldn't have gotten worse. All Brian could do now was hope the zombies would leave his body intact. Suddenly, another gunshot rang out, saving him from becoming their next meal. It turned out to be a group of local soldiers. After confirming that Brian hadn't been bitten, Daniel told him to get into the vehicle and then helped him get the car moving again. Since Daniel had just saved his life, Brian decided to take him along. Before the virus outbreak, the two men had belonged to opposing forces. But as the virus spread, Brian's unit was forced to evacuate by plane. What they didn't know was that one of the soldiers had already been infected, eventually causing the aircraft to crash into the sea. Now Brian only wanted to reach the airport and find a way out of this hellhole. Daniel, meanwhile, had been stationed at a local quarantine checkpoint. After the virus swept through his village, his surviving son was taken to a safe zone, so Daniel was determined to find him. After learning each other's circumstances, the two men decided to help one another. Daniel would first drive Brian to the nearby airport, and then continue on his own to search for his son. Later, they passed through another village and decided to search for supplies. The two men carefully checked each house, until one particular building caught their attention. The entire place had been boarded up with wooden planks. Brian cautiously approached to take a look, only for a zombie inside to suddenly lunge straight at his face. Both men were caught completely off guard and immediately opened fire. After taking care of the zombies, they found plenty of useful supplies inside the house. Daniel even managed to catch a chicken outside, so at least they had dinner covered. The two men continued toward their destination. They were almost at the airport when the car suddenly ran out of gas. With no other choice, they had to continue on foot. But when they finally reached the airport, there was no sign of any planes, except for a single wrecked aircraft. Brian went to the control tower and tried calling for help, but no one responded. Luckily, Daniel found a container of gasoline, so Brian had no choice but to follow him toward the safe zone. By the time they returned to the car, it was already getting dark. Daniel kept watch while Brian refueled the vehicle. After taking down a zombie, the two successfully left the area. Zombies were everywhere along the road, so Brian didn't dare stop and ended up driving for several hours straight. But when a zombie suddenly appeared right in front of the car, Brian instinctively swerved to avoid it and accidentally drove off the road. With complete darkness surrounding them, Daniel told Brian to turn on the headlights, but Brian refused, saying the light would only attract more zombies. However, they could clearly hear zombies approaching nearby. In order to locate their exact positions and fight back, Daniel insisted once again that Brian turn on the headlights.
Turn them on! Get out now.
The two quickly got out of the car and prepared to fight the zombies head-on. Daniel charged forward and effortlessly sliced a zombie's head clean off with his knife. Brian pulled out his pistol and wiped out most of the remaining zombies in seconds. Clearly, this small group was no match for them. They quickly fought their way out and found a safe place to set up camp, even roasting the chicken Daniel had caught earlier that day. After filling their stomachs, the two men went to sleep. To be honest, they had some serious nerves of steel. Even in a place crawling with zombies, they somehow managed to sleep like babies, completely oblivious to the noises coming from their traps. They didn't wake up until the zombies suddenly pounced on them. Brian reacted quickly and managed to escape, but Daniel wasn't so lucky. A zombie sank its teeth directly into his neck. Although the two eventually worked together to kill it, Daniel had already been infected. After sunrise, Brian carried Daniel to a tree. As he lay dying, Daniel handed Brian the pendant around his neck and asked him to take it to the safe zone and find his son. After saying those final words, Daniel lost consciousness. Brian then gave Daniel a final mercy shot before continuing toward the safe zone alone. Having learned his lesson from the previous night, Brian decided to camp in a tree this time and safely made it through the night. He then continued toward his destination. According to the map Daniel had given him, all he had to do was cross the steep rocks ahead and then make his way through a desert. After that, he would finally reach the safe zone. Although Brian encountered plenty of zombies along the way, he eventually managed to climb to the top. But what greeted him was an endless desert stretching as far as the eye could see. The scorching heat quickly made every step nearly impossible. Just then, Brian spotted a zombie wearing protective clothing designed to shield it from the sun. A slight smile appeared on Brian's face. After killing the zombie, he immediately stripped off its protective clothing and put it on himself. After several hours of exhausting travel through the desert, he finally reached the safe zone. The entrance was already surrounded by zombies. Brian drew the machete from his waist and hacked his way through the horde, eventually managing to climb over the wall and enter the safe zone. The survivors inside couldn't believe what they were seeing. They quickly opened the gate for him and provided him with food and water. Luckily, there was also a radio communication device inside. After repairing it, Brian finally managed to contact his own unit. But the message he received was devastating. The zombie virus had already spread to the United States, and his family was now missing and their fate was unknown. His unit simply couldn't send a plane to rescue him. Hope instantly turned into despair, and Brian completely broke down. To make matters worse, the safe zone's doors were soon breached by the zombies, sending the survivors into a panic as they desperately tried to escape. As Brian watched the zombies brutally attack the survivors, he didn't try to help them or run away. Completely hopeless, he simply stood there and waited for death, still clutching the pendant Daniel had left behind. Then, a young boy suddenly recognized the pendant in Brian's hand. Brian immediately realized that the boy had to be Daniel's son, so he personally handed the pendant back to him. And with the boy finally appearing before him, Brian found a reason to keep fighting for his life once again.